The story begins with Hiraku. He was called by a god because in his previous life, he was betrayed by everyone and was also sick for 39 years. After his death, the god thought that he had a sad life. As a result, the god of worlds wanted to give Hiraku a second life. He wanted to give him a healthy body in his next life. Hiraku received a wish granted as a bonus. Hiraku wanted to be a farmer in his next life because he always watched farm shows in the hospital. Then, the god of worlds asked the god of agriculture if Hiraku could farm in his next life. Hiraku gained permission, and the god granted his wish to have a healthy body and to cultivate in a place where there were no humans nearby. Furthermore, God gave him the power of the all-powerful farming tool. So, he started his new life as a farmer and first looked around. After that, he tested the power of the all-powerful farming tool and found out that he could change it into any object and shape he wanted. The all-powerful farming tool had a passive ability that meant he never got tired of using it. Then, Hiraku tried to find water and dug into the ground until he found it. Hiraku quickly figured out how to use his new power to cut wood and build a small house for himself. Unfortunately, Hiraku could not build a house in time. He also wanted to make a campfire before nightfall, but it was already late. Before he realized it, he had dug a hole in a tree and carved wooden plates for himself. The next day, he tested the water, and after that started to make a campfire. While cutting wood, again a monster attacked him, and he defeated it immediately. Then, he had rabbit meat for lunch. After that, Hiraku created a bathroom and realized that he needed more privacy, so he built a room around the bathroom. In the afternoon, Hiraku wanted to grow vegetables and dug the ground, realizing that he had no seeds for fruits or vegetables. Hiraku then went to sleep, and when he woke up, he suddenly saw plants growing in his fields. He found out that he did not need seeds since the plants grew on their own. He did not know what kind of plants to expect, but he was happy that something was growing. However, he decided to protect his fields from wild animals and built a shelter for them. Meanwhile, wild rabbits often tried to eat his plants, and he defeated them all. In the following days, he lived off rabbit meat and managed to build a small cabin. Several days passed like this, and suddenly, 2 huge dogs appeared. They seemed injured. Hiraku took care of the 2 dogs and fed them. He fed them with his wild meat because just before that, he had killed a wild boar that was trying to break his wall. Then, Hiraku noticed that one of the female dogs was pregnant. Hiraku wanted to help her, so he took the 2 dogs to his small cabin. He made a campfire in front of the cabin to keep the dogs warm, and then went to sleep. The next day, Hiraku was happy to see that the puppies were born, healthy, and he fed the 2 dogs meat. Then, several days passed, and Hiraku built a new house, living with the dogs. Additionally, the plants that had grown in the field turned into delicious tomatoes. Hiraku also named his dogs Yuki, and they helped him a lot in taking care of the vegetable fields and hunting for meat. That was the starting point of Hiraku's peaceful life. As a farmer in another world, in the following days, Hiraku discovered how to cultivate different types of vegetables because he only needed to imagine the type of vegetable he wanted to grow. The plants he desired always appeared. They grew very quickly. Unfortunately, Hiraku still had difficulties with farming and had much to learn. As a farmer, he also created statues to honor the gods who gave him his new life. Then, Hiraku made a stew and observed that he needed spices, as his food was very bland. In the following days, he grew fruits and often played with his dogs. He noticed that they evolved over time. His dogs were very helpful because, with their help, he could explore the forest, where he found a river. Then, Hiraku decided to build a water supply for his settlement and immediately began construction work. By building the water supply, he increased his arable land to continue cultivating. Many days passed, and slowly it got colder. Hiraku wanted to prepare for winter, but the fur of wild animals smelled bad, so he could not use it to keep warm. One day, a giant spider appeared. She greeted Hiraku and showed her amazing ability to create clothing. The spider could make clothes, and Hiraku accepted her presence in his settlement. After that, the giant spider lived with Hiraku and made clothes and other great things he wanted. Then, the spider was named Zabutom. Winter came, and Hiraku was perfectly prepared for the cold days. But during the winter, he realized that he felt lonely, without someone to talk to. When spring arrived, the puppies of his dogs had grown and gone into the forest. They reappeared a few days later and had found mates. Additionally, there was another surprise in spring, as Zabutom appeared with puppies even after the winter. However, Hiraku increased his arable land, knowing he needed to produce more food. While cultivating the fields, Hiraku was signaled and alerted by his pets, and his dog, Kuro, led him to the forest. Hiraku spotted a little girl and his dogs threatened her. Hiraku stopped the dogs and went to give her his jacket, but the girl bit Hiraku on the neck. She drank his blood and thanked him, but one of his dogs reacted and attacked her again, thinking the girl was attacking Hiraku. As a result, she shrank back to the form of a little girl. Then, the little girl apologized to Hiraku, and he understood that she was harmless. Thus, Hiraku learned that she had fought against his dogs and had used all her strength in the struggle. Hiraku offered for her to drink his blood so that she could maintain her true form. Then she grew again, and he showed her his settlement and the types of vegetables he cultivated. The vampire girl, named Lu, was impressed with his vegetables as she saw them for the first time. He spent the whole day with her showing his plants, and at night learned that she was a vampire who was being hunted by nobles. For this reason, she fled to the forest, and Hiraku learned that his dogs and spiders were strong wild beasts. After that, Lu asked if she could stay longer in his settlement to research his plants. Hiraku was pleased with her words and asked her if I would like to live with him forever. He felt very lonely. Lu was uncertain at first, as there were dangerous people behind her and she did not want to put Hiraku in danger. However, Hiraku changed her mind, and Lu interpreted his question as a proposal. She asked if he really wanted her as his wife. When Hiraku understood the misunderstanding, he did not hesitate and asked her to be his wife again. She accepted his proposal and decided to live with him forever. The next day, Hiraku was taking care of his crops, and Lu appeared wanting to see more of his produce. Lu also asked if he could sow medicinal herbs in the fields. Then, Hiraku lived with his new wife, Lu. Their settlement slowly grew into a village. Since Lu had been living with Hiraku, her life improved significantly because Lu could create light using magic. Moreover, Hiraku learned from Lu where he could get salt to season his meals. After that, Hiraku wanted to show her the new plants he had cultivated, and he had tea with her. Suddenly, the alarm went off, and Hiraku looked toward the forest. Upon arriving at the forest, an angel was being attacked by her pets and was trapped. Hiraku freed her, and the woman thanked him, using her healing powers to heal his wounds. Then Lu tried to escape secretly because the angel wanted to catch her. However, the angel was invited to Hiraku's house and learned that he was Lu's husband. She was surprised by the news. Then Tia introduced herself and explained that she was an angel. Hiraku also discovered that Lu had a bounty on her head because she always caused trouble while searching for medicines and potions. The reason was that she always caused explosions that caused a lot of property damage. Lu replied to her statement that it was unintentional and told Hiraku that she had run into the forest because Tia was after her. After that, Lu asked if Tia would like to live with them in Hiraku's settlement. Then, Lu showed her the fields of the village, and when she introduced Tia to the spider Zabutom, she fainted with fear. When Tia regained consciousness, they showed her the types of vegetables Hiraku had planted. Hiraku seasoned his salad with salt, and Tia tasted the salad. They then harvested vegetables until evening. Hiraku was jealous of the two for being able to purify themselves with magic. At night, they asked Tia if she enjoyed the day, and then Lu decided that Tia should live with them in the village. In the following days, they harvested delicious vegetables and fruits, and Tia helped Hiraku expand the village. A few days later, they passed by the doghouse, and Hiraku noticed that his dogs had given birth to new puppies. So, Yuki and Kuro's dog family grew again. Hiraku wanted to give them more space and planned to build a larger doghouse for them, and also wanted to think of names for the puppies. After that, some of Zabutom's children said goodbye to Hiraku. Later, Tia also wanted to leave the village for a while. She said she wanted to do a few small things outside the village. A few days later, Tia reappeared with a group of tall elves, and they introduced themselves, all using the surname Leah, and then explained to him that their village had been destroyed in the war, and they had been homeless since then. Hiraku invited the tall elves to his village because he saw no problem in them living there. After that, the elves were introduced to the giant spider. Zabutom and the Hell Wolves by Hiraku made the high elves faint from fear, as Hiraku's pets were actually dangerous monsters. After that, they built houses and bathrooms. The high elves were impressed by Hiraku's ability to fell trees because he had enormous strength. 10 days later, the houses for the elves were ready. Hiraku felt down, as the elves' houses were much nicer than his small cabin. After that, they looked at the new houses, and Hiraku hoped the high elves would feel comfortable in their village. In the following days, the elves settled in, and Hiraku realized that his knowledge about elves from his previous life was completely wrong. He realized that they were not vegetarians, and that they had blacksmithing skills. In the following days, Hiraku built a forge, and the elves made cooking pots. Hiraku was pleased with the cooking pots the elves could make. Then the elves thanked him and said they were happy to have found a new home and could now focus on making babies. Hiraku noticed they knew nothing about making babies, but he was not ready to tell the innocent elves how babies were born. In the days that followed, they lived together, and Hiraku baked the bread that he let everyone sample. When Hiraku wanted to plant more fields for new crops, he realized he did not know who owned the piece of land on which he founded his village. He said it technically belonged to the demon lord, but he said he didn't need to worry, as he built everything by himself on that land. so now he was the owner of that piece of land. At night, the women chatted amongst themselves, admiring Hiraku for being able to grow such delicious vegetables and also for taming such strong monsters like the hell wolf and demon spiders. In the following days, Zabutom caught a giant queen bee and wanted Hiraku to keep the queen bee as a pet. However, Hiraku built a small house as a home for the queen bee and looked forward to the honey his bees would produce. After that, Hiraku wanted to build a water reservoir, and he and an elf figured out how to transport water from the river to the village. The next step was for Hiraku to create a waterway with the dug-up soil, so they would always have fresh water in the village. The elves were very diligent and helped Hiraku with the construction work. The water supply for his village was quickly completed with the help of the high elves, and Hiraku could irrigate his fruits and vegetables. While building his water supply, he also found fresh fish. They were washed, and he decided to grill them. The others in the village were surprised that Hiraku cooked them in a dish, as the fish were very dangerous, and no one could imagine they would taste good. When Hiraku's fish dish was cooked, no one wanted to try it because they were afraid. Hiraku tried it first, and it was delicious. Then, his wife, Lu, and her friend Tia also enjoyed the fish dish, which made the elves want to try it too. In the following days, Hiraku wanted to plant rice. He built a flooded field, and everyone was surprised that he filled his field with water. They thought he wanted to raise fish, but Hiraku taught them how to plant rice in the field. When the rice was ready to be harvested, the elves helped to gather it. After that, Hiraku dried his rice, and when he finished processing it, he cooked the rice in a pot. Then, Hiraku made rice dumplings, and the girls were surprised by how delicious they were. Everyone loved Hiraku's rice dumplings, so there was nothing left for him. In the following days, Hiraku built a bathhouse and tried to find a way to dispose of sewage. He replaced the water pipe, and Tia showed Hiraku cute slimes that were harmless and could clean dirt. He used them as filters to recycle his water. While Hiraku was chopping wood, he also attempted to cultivate edible mushrooms. So everything was prepared for his bathhouse, and Hiraku had to show the girls how to behave in the bathhouse. When Hiraku was in the bathtub, all the women appeared with him in the bath, and Hiraku showed his shy side. He couldn't relax in the presence of the beautiful women. The next day, Hiraku's edible mushrooms had grown, and his hell wolves found 5 more elves. Their names all started with the letter L, and they were also lucky to live in Hiraku's village. Then we see Kuro's previous life, while he lived without his master Hiraku. Kuro lived alone in the dangerous forest and had never lost a fight until he met Yuki. She defeated him instantly, and he fell in love with her. However, one day, she became pregnant, and Kuro eagerly awaited his pups, but they were attacked by a very strong bear. Kuro and his wife were injured and did not have enough strength to hunt for their own food. Then, they met Hiraku. At first, they thought Hiraku was a weak human, but he gave them food, and they saw his strength fighting against a boar. Thus began life with Hiraku, and soon after, Kuro's children were born. Hiraku took care of his pups, and more powerful women appeared in his village, which he led. Kuro knew that Hiraku had all-powerful power, but wondered if Hiraku knew that Kuro was a dangerous hell wolf and not a dog. Even though Hiraku did not know his true identity, Kuro enjoyed spending time with him. After that, Hiraku was building a new house and could not believe how much space the house had. Moreover, Hiraku discovered that he had a great view of the giant tree of his village from his new house. He was happy with the construction of the high elves and also placed statues of Kuro and Yuki outside his new house. The next day, Hiraku wanted to cook curry and still needed spices, so he showed Lu and Tia new plants that were ready to be harvested. With his all-powerful farming tool, he planted delicious spices that went very well with his dishes. Then, Hiraku showed the 2 girls different types of vegetables, and they dried them with their magic to turn them into spices. When Hiraku showed cilantro to his dogs, they ran away, as they could not stand the smell. Lu and Tia were intrigued by the fact that hell wolves did not like cilantro. After that, Hiraku harvested black pepper and cayenne. Then, Hiraku had all the spices for his curry, and the elf Leah wanted to help him cook. So, Hiraku and Leah began to prepare everything. Leah learned a lot cooking with Hiraku. Then, Hiraku showed her the steps to cook a curry meal. He attracted many spectators with the delicious smell of his curry. When they were almost done making the curry, Hiraku noticed he had to cook a bread called naan to accompany it. So, Hiraku prepared the dough, and Leah rolled it while more and more people showed up. Hiraku watched as it cooked. When Hiraku's naan bread was ready, he served the curry to all his friends and showed them how to eat the dish. He dipped his bread in the sauce, and when everyone tasted it, they were amazed at how delicious the curry was. All the women loved his curry and immediately asked for more. Thus, the dish was quickly consumed, and Hiraku was happy with their lovely smiles. In the following days, Hiraku prepared for winter by gathering enough firewood and collecting zabuton blankets. Meanwhile, Ant and Lu used magic to preserve meat for the winter, as the hell wolves could not hunt in the snow. Then, Hiraku tried to preserve vegetables, feeling jealous of the others since he could not use magic. At night, Lu explained to him that humans needed magic in their bodies to cast spells. Hiraku told his wife Lu how much he would like to do magic, but Lu encouraged him, saying he didn't need it because he was special even without magic. When winter arrived, Hiraku spent a lot of time playing games. He created funny games on his own and explained to his friends how the rules worked. When Lu was playing with Ant and almost lost, Hiraku observed that Lu hated losing because she flipped the entire board. Ant could not accept this and used her magic against Lu to set the board back. Then he watched the elves, and Hiraku noticed that their dogs were extremely intelligent and very good at chess. After that, Lu wanted to play against Kuro. She lost. Later, they played mahjong, and Hiraku thought he would win against Kuro, but his dog, once again, defeated everyone in the game. In the following days, Hiraku created more games, and as a result, they played bowling. Hiraku showed off his skills to everyone, but the women played better than him. Thus, Hiraku spent the winter playing and cooking delicious foods with his friends. Winter passed quickly, and when spring arrived, Hiraku wanted to wake his giant spider Zabutom from hibernation. Suddenly, a wyvern flew towards them. Hiraku was warned by Zabutom that danger was approaching. The wyvern displayed its enormous strength and attacked Hiraku's village with a breath of fire. Hiraku wanted to protect everyone, so he tried to shape a spear with his all-powerful farming tool. He managed to create a strong spear and immediately attacked the wyvern. The wyvern countered with a strong barrier, but Hiraku was able to injure the wyvern in the wing and immediately attacked again, defeating the strong wyvern. After that, Hiraku searched for the wyvern in the forest, and Lu said that a dragon appeared relatively rarely. The reason was that wyverns are rare creatures. Hiraku feared that someone might have sent the wyvern to attack them. The others assumed he was destined to appear alone, and Hiraku decided to eat the wyvern. As a result, Hiraku prepared a delicious wyvern steak. With many delicious side dishes, everyone found Hiraku's dish delightful and were happy to taste the rare meat. During the meal, Lu asked her aunt if she could dodge Hiraku's spear attack, but they couldn't, because Hiraku was too strong. Then we see the demon general Bezel in the demon palace. He reported to the other demon generals that a wyvern had been defeated by unknown people. Meanwhile, the dragon named Dream also saw the attack from its cave, and its assistant said that even Dream would perish from Hiraku's attack. The next morning, Hiraku wanted to make alcohol, and the elves were enchanted. They then harvested grapes, and Hiraku built a device to process the grapes. The girls crushed the grapes while Hiraku took care of the barrels. Thus, the girls began to walk on the grapes, but the aunt stumbled, and they tried to step on the grapes in the same rhythm. The elves began to sing, and everyone had a great time making wine. Then, Hiraku also joined them, stepping on the grapes. At night, they had many barrels full of crushed grapes, and the god of worlds was being scolded by the goddess of agriculture. The reason was that the goddess was angry because he had sent Hiraku to the death forest and also gave him a replica of the sacred green lance. She was upset because the death forest was too dangerous for a normal human, and if he didn't have such a healthy body, his weapon would have drained all his vital energy. So the god of worlds was punished by his daughter. The next day, Hiraku encountered another little vampire girl named Flora in the forest. It turned out she was Lu's younger sister. Upon arriving in the village, Flora learned that Hiraku was Lu's husband, and she couldn't believe it at first because she thought Hiraku was a weak human. Then Kuroa threatened her for her disrespect towards Hiraku. Flora then apologized, and Hiraku discovered that her dogs were actually wolves. At night, Flora discovered Hiraku's delicious food and learned many new things in her village. Flora liked the village and appeared a month later with an army of maidens. The leader of the maidens was En. They belonged to the ogre race and also brought cows with them. Suddenly realizing that her aunt had no equals, she also called for reinforcements, and upon returning to the village, brought 3 angel guardians to Hiraku's village. She also returned with a group of lizardmen who brought chickens. Hiraku was happy they were normal chickens. Otherwise, he would have only encountered dangerous animals. In the following days, he saw the maidens, and they took care of Hiraku's house. They were professionals and completed all tasks very quickly, but their food was bland. After that, Hiraku taught the maidens new delicious dishes. The maidens learned quickly and were happy to have acquired new cooking skills with Hiraku. Then we see the three angels of the ant. They ensured the safety of the village and regularly patrolled the forest. Afterward, Hiraku took care of the lizardmen, who sped up the construction work. The leader of the lizardmen wore a red bandana on his arm because Hiraku couldn't differentiate them. Then, Hiraku noticed that the population of his village had grown quite a bit since the beginning. Suddenly, one of the elves appeared and showed him another group of elves, who was found in the forest at night. Hiraku wanted to choose a name for his village and brainstormed with his friends. Zabutom gave Hiraku an idea, and he named it the Village of the Great Tree. Everyone loved the name of the village, and all the villagers wanted Hiraku as the mayor of their village, so they began to celebrate, and the Village of the Great Tree was officially established. In the days that followed, Hiraku's village was officially established, and everyone settled in Hiraku's village. Suddenly, an alarm went off, and an angel informed that a demon from the demon palace had arrived. Then, the demon general Bizo introduced himself. Hiraku stated that he was the mayor of the Village of the Great Tree and received a bottle from Bizo that made Lu happy. However, Hiraku remembered that his village was built on the land of the demon lord and was willing to pay taxes to the demon lord. So, Hiraku suggested offering part of his harvest as tax payment. He offered 10% of his annual harvest. The contract was then concluded that Hiraku would give them 10% of the field crops annually, and Bizo teleported back to the demon palace. After that, Hiraku learned from Lu that his village was now under the protection of the demons and the normal tax burden was 50 to 60%. The girls were impressed with Hiraku for making a good deal and praised him. Additionally, Lu was delighted with the bottle, which was a powerful potion. Then, we see the demon generals. They were happy that Hiraku was now an ally of the demons. Bizo reported that Hiraku had the vampire Lu and the powerful angel Tia as allies. He also had other strong allies who could eliminate an entire army. The demon generals feared Hiraku's village because they only had strong warriors and monsters, so Bizo was grateful that they agreed to a peaceful solution. Then they discovered Hiraku's gift and tasted the apples. Suddenly, they noticed that Hiraku also had a demon spider by his side, which was a very dangerous monster. The next day, the giant dragon Dream appeared and brought a sword as a gift for Hiraku. Dream's servant told Hiraku that they were neighbors of Hiraku. Hiraku invited Dream to his village, and he transformed into a human. Dream was very shy, and Hiraku showed him his wine, so Dream got drunk and liked Hiraku's village. He wanted to stay longer, but Dream's servant thanked him for his hospitality and dragged Dream back home. Then, Hiraku had an idea. He wanted to build a new house for visitors. Tia suggested to Hiraku that the elves would prefer to build a house for 30 people, since most visitors arrived in large groups. So, he planned a welcome for the visitors. Hiraku was aware that the giant Maria and the angels frightened the guests. Moreover, the lizard men always prepared to fight whenever the alarm went off. The elves then made another bell that made a different sound to signal visitors. Through Zabutom, Hiraku also formed a team to welcome the visitors. After that, he asked Flora if she could help too, and she was assigned to night security. The next day, visitors from the village, the Avantes, appeared. Garfe said that they wanted to establish a relationship with the village of Hiraku welcomed them, and she observed that the groups were not honest with them. Lu sensed other people in the group, and the Hell Wolves captured the second group. Garf apologized and promised not to mess up again. After that, Garf's group was received by the maidens, and the men were happy to see so many beautiful maidens. Pirako then wanted to bring them delicious food, but Tia said that Garf had not brought a gift. Moreover, she was not sure if they were evil or good because they were hiding another group in the forest. Lu only wanted to serve them regular dishes, and Hiraku learned that Kudel and the other angels noticed the second group but ignored them for being weak. So, only common food was served, and Hiraku wanted to serve them delicious food, but the maid was not averse to Hiraku's idea. Hiraku felt bad for the visitors, and Tia told them to be careful. Hiraku was happy to at least serve wine and wanted to find out if they had more intentions regarding his village. Thus, Hiraku asked them about the Avante village. He learned that it consists of 5 different settlements, and most of the villagers are beastmen. Furthermore, Hiraku learned that they earn their money by hunting and mining. They had also traded with a human before the village, but problems arose. They were seeking a new trading partner. That's how they discovered the Great Tree Village, and were happy to have met Hiraku, who provided them delicious food to eat. Tia learned that the beastmen were hiding in 2 groups, as the second group was supposed to get help if something bad happened to the first group. That's how Hiraku learned that the beastmen were very nice guys. They then discussed solutions to trade goods with each other, as they still had no currency. The beastman Garf said that finding their village was very difficult. As a result, Hiraku had the idea of using his dogs to transport their goods. Then Hiraku learned about various goods that the Avante village was producing. Hiraku wanted their goods and made an agreement with Garf. They then said their goodbyes, and Garf apologized for not bringing a gift because they were unfamiliar with the customs of other villages. Hiraku was not angry with him, and Garf said he would bring a gift next time. Several days later, the Great Tree Village prepared to make its first trade with the Wivante village. Hiraku sent Tia and a group of lizard men to negotiate with the Wivante village. Dream offered to help Hiraku. He was a regular visitor to Hiraku's village and always brought many gifts that the girls liked. So, Tia and the lizard men flew with Dream to the Avante village. The beastmen were scared at first, but Tia managed to gain their trust. After that, Dream was sad that the wine was sold as well, and Hiraku wanted to reward Dream with wine as a tip. Tia then said that the Wivante village would like to send some people from their village to live there. Hiraku allowed them to live in his village, but wanted at least 2 young men sent as a condition. In the following days, women and beastmen were sent, and they were very nervous. Hiraku gained their trust and encouraged them. Then, he met the little beastmen boys, and Hiraku realized that the Avante village had misinterpreted his intention. In the days that followed, the beastmen group moved to the village of Hiraku and were very nervous. The girls were afraid of being treated badly. After that, they learned that the villagers were very nice. Lamalia later reported that they had still not overcome the fear of Zabutom and his infernal wolves. More days passed, and Hiraku saw that Sina could use magic. Hiraku was jealous of being the only one who could not use magic. After that, Hiraku visited the villagers using magic to cultivate the plants. Then, we could see that all the villagers could use magic, and each had a special element. Even their pets could cast powerful spells. He was amazed. Then, the slime also showed that it could use magic, and Hiraku became depressed. Sina tried to cheer Hiraku up, saying that the little boys could not use magic yet. After that, Hiraku was harvesting apples, but dangerous monsters caused an earthquake. Big Maria told Hiraku that 2 strong monsters were fighting and posed a danger to their village. Hiraku wanted to hunt the 2 strong monsters. Then, Big Maria flew with Hiraku to the huge bear and the enormous snake that were fighting. Hiraku defeated both giant monsters using just his powerful cultivation tool. His infernal wolf, Kuro, was shocked by Hiraku's powers, and the other angels were also impressed with Hiraku. After that, Hiraku used the bear meat to cook a stew with wine. The girls were sad that their wine was used in cooking. Hiraku learned that bear meat had a wild taste, but his fried snake was very tasty. Everyone enjoyed Hiraku's snake dish because it fit perfectly in their mouths. Later, he asked Flora for medicine, and she showed him several healing potions. Flora was able to help Hiraku, and he thanked her for her help. Then he discovered that their miso production was not going very well. Hiraku encouraged her not to give up. The next day, Hiraku collected chicken eggs and mixed various ingredients. Then Hiraku explained to Flora how to make mayonnaise. The cooking class continued, and Flora learned to prepare miso. Flora was able to learn a lot from Hiraku, and they managed to make coffee. When they were done, Hiraku was informed that they had visitors. Hiraku met a group of dwarves led by Donovan. They wanted wine from Hiraku, but unfortunately did not have any money. Then, Donovan offered his technology. He wanted to help Hiraku produce more and better alcoholic drinks. The girls were delighted with Donovan's proposal. After that, the dwarves produced several types of alcoholic drinks. As a result, Donovan produced whiskey, and Hiraku was surprised because the whiskey was very strong. Then the dwarves also moved to Hiraku's village, and Hiraku threw a welcome party for the beastmen and dwarves. Prime loved Donovan's new drink and got immediately drunk. Meanwhile, Donovan thanked Hiraku, and Hiraku wanted to have a man-to-man conversation. He asked what kind of women Donovan liked. He replied that all were beautiful, but he preferred older women. In the days that followed, a dragon appeared again, and Hiraku was ready to kill the dragon. Suddenly, Dream attacked the dragon, and another dragon appeared. Hiraku launched his attack with his spear and almost hit. He tried to attack again and was interrupted by Dream's servants. Then, Hiraku discovered it was Dream's daughter, Last Moon, and his wife, Graffalo. Hiraku then knew that Dream caused these problems because he used to sneak out at night to party in Hiraku's village. They were jealous and thought Dream was cheating on his wife. Hiraku felt sympathy for his family, and Dream was reprimanded by his daughter and wife. After that, Dream's daughter and wife apologized to Hiraku for causing trouble. The misunderstanding was then clarified. Graffalo understood how dangerous Hiraku was. Last Moon was also aware that, without the demon spider saving her, she would have died from Hiraku's attack. Suddenly, Gruffalo wanted her daughter to live in Hiraku's village. She should ensure that the Great Tree Village never saw dragons as enemies. After that, Last Moon was taken to the Great Tree Village. Then, Hiraku showed Last Moon her duties in the village, and Hiraku discovered that she was very powerful and always accidentally destroyed things. As a result, Hiraku did not know for what job she was suitable, then realized that everyone was scared because of Last Moon's dragon aura. Later, Last Moon was put in charge of the diplomatic relations of Hiraku's village. Bezel was shocked to learn that there was now a dragon girl living in Hiraku's village. He was frightened and wanted to buy fruits. Bisu was afraid of Last Moon and bought everything because he did not want to get into trouble. When Bisu told the other demon generals about Last Moon, he decided to send his daughter to Hiraku's village as well. She was to investigate the Great Tree Village and find out the fighting power of Hiraku's village. After that, she used a spell to become invisible and was shocked to realize that Hiraku had built a village in a forest full of dangerous monsters. After that, she was greeted by Last Moon and was amazed to see that a feared dragon lived in the village. However, Damon Flaren explored the village alone and could not believe that the villagers were so many powerful warriors. Flaren saw only strong people everywhere. When she saw Hiraku's pets, she knew that the Great Tree Village was stronger than any army in the world. She took notes, and all she needed to do was find out who the mayor was. Suddenly, she ran into Hiraku. She thought Hiraku was a normal human and ignored him. Later, Flaren learned from Last Moon that Hiraku is not a normal human, as he could even kill Last Moon's parents with just one attack. In the days that followed, Flaren moved into the village and became good friends with Last Moon. In the days that followed, we saw slimes in Hiraku's village. There were many types, and a little slime drank an entire barrel of wine. The girls got angry with him and wanted to punish him, so the trial of the little slime began, and the girls declared him guilty. Suddenly, Flora appeared and stopped them, so the little slime was acquitted and allowed to party with the girls and drink alcohol. From that day on, the slime was happy and enjoying life in Hiraku's village. Then, we see Hiraku. He had finished his work and his stomach was rumbling from so much labor. Then he went to have lunch with the girls. They were cooking a vegetable stew, and Hiraku wanted to eat seafood. He talked about his favorite dish, chancho, which is cooked with seafood and vegetables. After that, Lu and her younger sister looked for information, while the other girls were scared because in their world fish are enormous monsters. They were shocked and could not believe that the dangerous monsters could be cooked in a delicious stew, so they decided to visit a fish merchant in a town in the demon area near their village. Hiraku was surprised that the girls had a passion for stews. Thus, a team flew to the port city to fetch fresh seafood. 3 days later, the group returned, and a manager from the garum company accompanied the girls. Hiraku met the friendly businessman, Top G, Michael, and he showed him the fish that his company had caught. Then, Hiraku asked if he could buy seaweed, and Michael wanted to take care of his order immediately. After that, Michael wanted to do business with Hiraku. He wanted to become his official government supplier for his village. He said he would like to sell his fruits and vegetables to the outside world. Lu replied that many people were interested in their products, so Michael showed the girls a list of his products. After that, Michael became the new business partner of Hiraku's village, and he also wanted to sell his alcoholic beverages. But last days intimidated him, and he became scared and wanted to go home. Hiraku was happy to do business with Michael, and they hoped to work together in the future. Then we see Michael. He was happy to not have been killed by the villagers of the Great Tree Village. After that, we see the city of Charado. Michael was in his office, and his assistant said that unregistered people wanted to do business with him. Michael was the head of his company and was very busy. He wanted to send them away, but his sixth sense told him that he would regret refusing their visit. So Michael greeted the guests, and he immediately recognized Flora. Furthermore, he met Lastismo and became frightened, as she is known as the Crazy Dragon. Lastismo, Michael was aware that the two belonged to the most powerful families, and he looked at their products. Then he saw Hiraku's precious fruits and was ready to do business with them. Thus, Michael said he could get all the seafood, and the two were happy to negotiate with Michael. After that, he wanted to personally deliver the seafood and was scared that the Great Tree Village is in the Death Forest. After that, he also encountered the dragon family arriving at Hiraku's village. He was frightened to meet the strong villagers, but he learned that Hiraku is a nice guy. In the present, Michael could not believe he was making the best deal of his life, but he was shaking and very exhausted from his visit to the Great Tree Village. After that, Hiraku and his friends ate a wonderful seafood chancho. The next day, a dragon appeared for the third time. Hiraku wondered if the dragon was a relative of Drive. Suddenly, the dragon attacked their village, and Hiraku, provoked, attacked the dragon with his powerful farming tool. The dragon was arrogant, and he struck the dragon, causing the dragon to fall to the ground. Hiraku managed to defeat the dragon. As a result, the dragon girl said she had lost and surrendered. Hiraku was angry and asked why she attacked the forest. Suddenly, Dream appeared and apologized to Hiraku. Dream explained to Hiraku that Hakuren is her older sister. Then Hakuren said she was curious about the future husband of her niece. That's how Hiraku learned that Dream was drunk and saying that Lastis would one day marry Hiraku. After that, Hakuren said she wanted to test Hiraku's strength. She just wanted to play with him a little. Hiraku then forced Hakuren to repair the destroyed forest. Then Hakuren met the village of the Great Tree, and she also fell in love with her village. 5 days passed and Hakuren heard about the game Mahjong. The dragon family wanted to play Mahjong with a bet to make it more exciting. Lastis also loved the idea, and Hiraku was forced to play Mahjong so he wouldn't lose his clothes to them. They then played Mahjong together. The dragons were very good at the game. Hiraku learned that dragons don't like to lose, and he was almost naked. Hiraku was only in boxers and thought that maybe the dragons were cheating. He realized it was absurd because they were very friendly and wouldn't cheat. Suddenly, Hiraku had a plan to win and was sure he would win this time. After that, Hiraku lost to the dragons, and the girls wanted to see Hiraku naked. After that, we see the demon generals. They learned that another dragon lives in Hiraku's village. They were worried, and the demon lord Galgardo wasn't even listening. He wondered if his daughter was in her rebellious phase. A few days later, Hakuren decided to live in the village of the Great Tree, and she was very lazy, always making a fuss. So Hiraku gave her the task of teaching the children to read, write, and do math. Hakuren enjoyed her new job. After that, we see the Lamia girls. They asked Hiraku if he could help them. Hiraku didn't know what they were talking about and found out about their hell wolf pups. They discovered a dungeon and accidentally scared the Lamia girls. Hiraku apologized and gave them his delicious fruits. After that, Hiraku volunteered to trade goods with them, and they worked together from then on. However, Hiraku and the Lamia girls set up a delivery service for Hiraku's goods and their village. Then, the village of the Great Tree grew again. Meanwhile, the demon. Princess sent 3 demons to rescue Flarum, thinking she was in danger. The next night, Flarum was busy with paperwork, and her father Bisol came to visit. Bisol reported that Princess Yuri was raising an army to prepare for an attack. Flarum learned that 3 nobles were leading the army, so she was shocked that the princess targeted the village of the Great Tree, even though they had so many strong warriors. Bisol tried to stop the attack, but the demon lord couldn't change his daughter's mind. So the two thought of a plan to stop the attack. Flarum learned that they wanted to attack the next day with 300 demon soldiers. The next day, the demon army wanted to invade Hiraku's village, but was intimidated by the Lamia girls. The soldiers surrendered, and the 3 noble daughters were also frightened. Flarum reported the incident to Hiraku. Hiraku commented that the 3 girls seemed scared. Flarum said that they are the new employees of her village and are helping with the paperwork. Flarum then promised that the 3 girls would not misbehave in the future. Otherwise, the 3 girls would be personally punished by Flarum. Then, Hiraku asked who the 4th girl sitting on the throne was. Flarum replied that she was a friend of hers and was worried about Flarum. Furthermore, Flarum said that she would like to work in Hiraku's village for a short period. Hiraku left the girls with Flarum, and she told the 4 girls not to play around anymore. Then, Flarum showed her friend Yuri the village of the Great Tree, and she was fascinated by the water mills in Hiraku's village. Suddenly, the Beastman boys appeared. She thought the kids were cute and played with them. After that, the girls were shown the apple trees, and Aunt commented that the 3 girls were behaving like nobles. The girls said that taking care of the village would make their kingdom rich, so Flarum got angry. In the afternoon, they met Lasties. Yuri thought Lasties was a really cute girl. Meanwhile, the other girls were planning to escape at night. The girls tried to escape the village and were afraid of Hiraku's pets. They failed to escape and decided to stay in Hiraku's village. The next day, Flarum played with a cute puppy. Yuri couldn't believe that Hiraku's dog was a dangerous and strong hell wolf. Flarum said that the puppies were really adorable and harmless, so Yuri was also allowed to play with the puppies. That's how Yuri learned about the beautiful village of Hiraku, and she felt embarrassed for having attacked such a grand village. Flarum then asked why she wanted to attack Hiraku's village. Yuri replied that she was worried about Flarum because she had suddenly disappeared from the demon palace. Then there was dinner, and the girls were also slowly adapting to the village of the Great Tree. Yuri learned that Hiraku was a good mayor. Suddenly, Hiraku discovered that his wife Lu could not control her magic at the moment, and she said that he did not need to worry. In the following days, Yuri wanted to help the little boys with work on the farm, and they were happy to harvest vegetables with Yuri. Then they spent a beautiful day peacefully together, and the Beastman boys liked her a lot. Later, Yuri was taken away, and the boys were sad. Moreover, Sina gave Yuri apples as a gift. so she wanted to return to the demon palace, but the three noble girls wanted to stay in Hiraku's village. They loved eating Hiraku's dishes, and the princess teleported back to the demon palace with Bissell. Then, a few months passed, and soon winter arrived in the village of the Great Tree. They were harvesting a lot of vegetables. Plastique wanted to send some vegetables to his parents. Hakuren also wanted to give vegetables to his parents, and Hiraku learned more about the dragons. Genealogy. They had a very powerful family, and last took the harvested vegetables to her parents. On the way, she also helped Michael fight against a fish monster and brought meat for Hiraku to cook a hot dish. Hakuren also took vegetables for his parents and brought a group of dark elves to the village of the Great Tree, and she was their leader, and Hiraku learned about their abilities. Hiraku then planned a place for them to sleep and welcomed the dark elves into his village. The next day, the girls did not want to be a burden to Hiraku and tried to hunt their own food. The monsters were too strong, and Hiraku said they did not need to help them hunt monsters. So, while going, he learned about the pottery he wanted to create. Hiraku could not make pottery, and Io wanted to help him. After that, she made perfect pottery. Later, the elves reported that they had discovered a new dungeon, and the Hell Wolves were excited to go with them. Meanwhile, Hiraku was in the men's bathroom. He had built a second bathroom for the men. Suddenly, the Beastman boys jumped into the bathroom, and outside, the three elegant girls planned to watch Hiraku take a bath. They wanted to see Master Risnu and were punished by Florum. That night, the elves returned and reported having seen a bloody viper inside the dungeon. They said its meat was very valuable to the elves, as it amplified a man's laughter to make children. Months passed, and winter came again. Hiraku was worried about his wife, Lu. She had been sick for a long time, and Lu said he did not need to worry. Suddenly, Sena noticed that Lu liked to eat sour foods lately, followed by Hiraku learning that his wife Lu was pregnant, and that Farmer Reese was expecting a child soon with his vampire mother. In the following months, everyone enjoyed the nice weather while working in the fields. Hiraku started his day with stretching exercises, then his pregnant wife Lu appeared. Hiraku was constantly worried about her since Lu became pregnant. The reason was that Hiraku was still overwhelmed by Lu being the future mother of their baby and was anxious about the child they would have together. Next, we see the maids preparing breakfast. Hiraku was an early riser, but the maids always felt obligated to wake up earlier than the master of the house, so Hiraku decided to sleep more because he was worried about the maids. After that, Hiraku learned that the wine slug had drunk a barrel again, and breakfast was also prepared. At breakfast, Hiraku heard that Floram had not slept well, as her experiment was a failure. While everyone was having breakfast, an angel informed Hiraku that he healed and defeated all the monsters that attacked his village. After eating, he went to see his lovely pets and his plants. He noticed that his field was being attacked by garden pests. Hiraku could easily make them disappear with his omnipotent cultivation tool. After that, Hiraku admired his delicious vegetables and continued to take care of his village. Then we see everyone having lunch. Hiraku had the idea of introducing lunch, and everyone loved his idea. At first, they were scared, as they lived very poor and did not get enough food in their previous lives to eat more than once a day, so they were very happy with Hiraku's decision. After that, Hiraku went back to work, and his pups snuggled up to him. Then, Hiraku planted beautiful flowers and also made toys for the children. Later, he made wooden swords for the maids and beastmen. They were obsessed with their training because the girls did not want to gain weight to continue wearing their cute maid dresses, so Hiraku tried to exercise too. And he immediately got tired of his training. Suddenly, a girl showed him some skills, and he used his omnipotent cultivation tool to destroy the tree trunk. In the afternoon, a new dish was served to him. Hiraku commented that it looked strange. The maid Anne said they didn't want to waste food, so Hiraku tried the dish, which was very sweet. Hiraku did not like the taste, but the dragon girls, Last and her aunt, liked the new dish. After that, Hiraku received a letter from the demon princess, Yuri. She said she loved the fashionable clothes created by Zabutan. When Hiraku finished eating, he went to the bathroom to relax. He was happy to have built a men's bathroom, as he felt strange bathing with all the girls. Thus, he enjoyed his time while bathing. When he finished bathing, he was observed by the elves. The girls followed him, and Hiraku could feel their gazes upon him. Hiraku knew they were just concerned about his safety, and he was grateful for his second life with his new friends. The next morning, Hiraku wanted to visit the dwarves. They were busy making alcohol, and Donovan was a very hard-working man. He took his job very seriously, and Hiraku was always impressed with his homemade liquor. Then, Donovan asked if he could plant more grapes. So Hiraku began to plan the expansion of his field. Suddenly, Sina appeared. She discovered a strange man in her village. Hiraku was surprised because the stranger managed to infiltrate his village and no one had noticed. Lu knew the man. He was the progenitor of the vampires. Hiraku met Vargreva and congratulated Lu on her pregnancy. After that, Hiraku learned that he was Lu's grandfather and had been alive for 4,000 years. Furthermore, Vargreva said that he erased his memories regularly to avoid getting bored with his life. He then apologized for invading their village, but he was attracted by the presence of their god statue. However, Hiraku learned that he met God when he came back to life. Vargreva also received a second life like Hiraku, and he simply became a vampire. Next, he said he tried to create a god statue, but never managed to create a perfect statue. Following that, Hiraku noticed that Vargreva wanted his statue. Hiraku could not give it up, and Vargreva became upset, so Hiraku offered to create another statue. However, Hiraku gave Lu's grandfather a statue. He was very grateful for his gift, and was happy to have met a good guy like Hiraku, and went on to a church. Then, Vargreva visited his established church and was greeted by an old friend. After that, he talked about his new statue and wanted to install the god statue immediately. The priest wanted to thank Hiraku for the statue, and they decided to give Hiraku a piano as a gift. After that, we see Hiraku sneezing and his wife Lu playing the new piano. Then they decided to place the piano in the dormitory, and the three noble demon girls also wanted to play music on the expensive piano. They then went over to the piano, but did not dare because they were afraid of breaking it. So, they asked Hiraku if he could buy a cheaper piano so they could practice. Hiraku didn't know why, but he ordered a second piano. In the days that followed, the girls played every day on the piano and enjoyed their time together. The girls played every day, and Hiraku hoped they would stop playing the piano at night. Then, spring passed and the weather warmed up a lot. Hiraku harvested fresh vegetables from his fields. When Hiraku tended to his plants, his wife, Lu, brought lunch for him and the girls. Thus, Hiraku took a break for lunch, and Lu made ice for his drink. The summer days were very hot, and Hiraku was worried about his baby mother. Lu said she was fine because everyone took good care of her since she was pregnant. Hiraku also learned that the maidens had witnessed many births. At night, the other girls wanted to talk about the baby and were already excited about Lu's son being born. Then, Lu said she was sad because she couldn't drink alcohol during pregnancy. As a result, all the girls decided to give up alcohol until the baby was born. They asked Hiraku to sell all the alcohol, as they thought it was selfish to drink alcohol without Lu. Thus, Hiraku told them they could also let the wine continue to age so it would be better. In the days that followed, the dwarves were sad, thinking that the girls didn't like their alcohol. Hiraku explained the misunderstanding to them, and they were excited. Then Donovan returned to work. A few weeks later, it was very hot in the village by the big tree. Everyone was enjoying the nice weather. Meanwhile, Hiraku checked on how his baby mother was doing, and Lu said everything was fine. As every day, Marako then learned that her aunt and the angels had given her the beautiful ice flower, which could cool her. Suddenly, a dark elf appeared. She wanted to bring a gift for Lu. Lu was happy with the gift and thanked her. After that, more villagers appeared, and Lu received many gifts. Everyone wanted to give something to Lu, and they went overboard with the gifts. At night, Hiraku and Lu looked at their many gifts and were very happy to have such nice friends. Then Hiraku spotted a hammer, and Lu suddenly felt dizzy. Hiraku's baby wanted to see the world and play with the pretty girls. They then prepared for Hiraku's son's birth, and he waited at home. Hiraku hoped his baby would be born healthy, and he visited his favorite spot in the village. Hiraku fell asleep on the tree. When morning came, he immediately went to see Lu. Hiraku then learned that Lu had given birth to a healthy boy. Hiraku was able to hold his boy in his arms, and he loved him. Then, Hiraku looked at his baby and couldn't believe he had become a father. Now Lu and Hiraku had become parents, and they were looking forward to time together as a family. Then, the first week passed since the birth of their son, and they named their son Alfred. Alfred received the powerful power Reese, and everyone was in love with baby Alfred. After that, Hiraku looked at his plants and remembered the good times. Then we see the time that Hiraku started with his second life until now, with all his happy memories with his friends. Hiraku decided to give something back to the villagers for their great support during Lu's pregnancy. However, Hiraku made coins and wanted to give everyone coins as a reward. Hiraku said they could use the money to buy goods and would not need to always ask Hiraku for permission again. All the villagers agreed with Hiraku's idea, but still needed to consider the value of all goods. Hiraku wanted to introduce a real coin later and wanted to run a test with the current coins. In the following days, Hiraku distributed his own minted coins to the villagers. Next, we see Hiraku diligently producing the coins. Then, the villagers exchanged the coins for goods. Everyone was having fun buying their own things. After the coins were introduced, many had special requests, and Hiraku made toys for all of them. A few days later, a little girl appeared and wanted to use the coin to buy a baby. Hiraku refused, as it was impossible, and instead offered to play with her and the other children. Then, night fell, and Hiraku held a party with the villagers. They celebrated the birth of their child, and the girls were happy to finally be able to drink alcohol again. Everyone was quite excited, and Florum celebrated with her nephew Alfred. Then, Hiraku wondered why the baby's mother, Lou, was holding a hammer. Suddenly, Donovan brought a huge barrel full of wine. They produced a special wine to congratulate Hiraku and Lou on the baby. Then they opened the wine barrel. Together, everyone celebrated together. Afterward, Hiraku and Lou were very happy to celebrate with their friends in their village. After that, Hiraku said that everyone should drink a lot that day. As a result, everyone drank a lot of wine. After a short period, almost everyone was drunk and dancing at the party. Meanwhile, Lou and Hiraku were talking with Donovan. Lou said she couldn't drink wine at the moment because she still needed to breastfeed her baby Alfred. As a result, Donovan decided to keep a bottle of wine for her. Hiraku and Lou were looking forward to the future with their child. Meanwhile, baby Florum said that Alfred was the best nephew in the world. Then we see the demon palace, and the demon general had already discovered Hiraku's baby. They knew about the power of the baby, Alfred. So the general suggested that one day Princess Yuri should marry Alfred. The next day, everyone worked together again in the village, and Hiraku enjoyed the nice weather. Suddenly, the aunt informed him that the angels had found needy people again. The girls wanted to allow them to move to the Great Tree Village, so they suggested building a second village, and were eager to expand the Great Tree with Hiraku. It didn't take long for the construction to begin, and everyone in the village received a role to fulfill, filling every corner with activity as they worked together to build the new village. At lunchtime, they brought sandwiches for Hiraku and the girls, but warned that they were made with ingredients that spoil quickly, so they advised that they start working harder to build a reserve of preserved food. Hiraku heard this and deduced that it explained why there were so many vegetables spread around. Then, the aunt intervened and suggested that they take some of the sandwiches to the girls who were working in the village hall. Hiraku thought it was a great idea and said he would take them himself, since Florin had mentioned that things were quite busy over there. Meanwhile, the village staff, Kakes, Roba, Rue, and Rosalind, had their heads resting on their desks, completely exhausted after hours of dealing with mountains of boring paperwork. At that moment, Hiraku entered carrying a basket and said he brought lunch for everyone. On the other hand, Last, Florin, and Hakurin were still adjusting to their new roles. As employees, it's clear that it will take some time before they master everything. Lasp sneezes a little and accidentally burns a document, causing both to panic. Office chefs look to Hiraku for help, but he simply tells them to calm down because Florence is already on her way with reinforcements. Then Florence enters with a group of girls sent from the demon realm to help. Most volunteered, mainly because they wanted to support Florence. They knew this would improve their social standing and had heard that the work would be easy, but after observing the environment they find themselves in, they start to doubt that. In any case, Florin puts them to work immediately and tells them they can start organizing the records by categories. Hiraku sees that Florin has everything under control, so he just tells her to make sure everyone gets some sandwiches when things calm down a bit. Hiraku goes back to work on some field tasks, but at that moment, Gran Maria flies down and gives him a report, saying she explored the surroundings and found no signs of danger. Then Ria approaches Hiraku and informs him that she was the one who sent Gran Maria to explore for a suitable location to establish the new village. At first, the protagonist thinks that the place Ria has in mind will be very far away, so he suggests preparing food for the trip. But Ria says that the location she considered isn't that far. It's just a little further down the river. She chose this place to have an odd advantage in case any rebellion occurs among the village members. Hiraku doubts that will happen, but Ria says it's always better to be prepared for any possible situation. Then, she points out the most prominent tree in the area. Although it's not as big as the current one, she believes it will be sufficient for what they need. With the location decided, they begin preparations to clear the trees in the area. Since it is Daga's land, he grabs his axe and steps forward to cut the first tree. But it is much more resilient than he expected, and he can't even make a deep cut. Then Hiraku takes his powerful farming tool and easily cuts the trees. After that, he builds a wooden bridge over the river, but he thinks they probably should have made something much sturdier. However, Ria reminds him that if they build something too large, the bigger monsters in the forest would also start using it, and Hiraku understands the point. Then Then, they begin working on constructing irrigation channels, and soon they have a completely built water reservoir ready for use. Later, Hiraku talks to Daga and tells him that they won't be able to advance enough without a greater amount of wood. But Daga replies that for now, he should rest because he and the others will take care of the construction from there. With plenty of free time, suddenly, Hiraku decides to use it to make a statue in honor of Sabutao. At that moment, Lucy approaches with baby Alfred in her arms and says he works too much. After that, they officially begin the construction of the houses. Hiraku remembers when he first arrived in this world and how difficult it was to build even a single house back then, since he didn't even have nails to work with. But now, with so much labor available and even some people capable of using magic, they finish the first batch of houses in no time, and Hiraku feels that everything it's starting to come together. But at this moment, Gran Maria suddenly flies down and says she just received a message from Dream, stating that he wants to bring new residents to the village immediately, which completely surprises both Hiraku and Ria. Then, the dragon arrives and apologizes for the sudden notice, explaining that the situation is very urgent. He then introduces Hiraku to a group of minotaurs that he hopes can move to his village. Hiraku observes and is surprised because he always imagined minotaurs with cow-like faces, but they appear almost completely human, except for the horns on their heads. The leader of the Minotaurs, Gordon, approaches Hiraku and introduces himself. After talking a bit, Hiraku realizes the huge difference in height between them, as Gordon is incredibly tall. Gordon explains that they were expelled from their village and have spent a long time wandering without a place to go, until they finally found someone who could help them. R learned about their situation and thought it was urgent enough to bring them directly to Hiraku. The protagonist decides there's no need to waste much time talking and asks Anne to prepare some food for them. Anne is unsure of what the Minotaurs can or cannot eat, so she decides to play it safe and serves sweet rice as it seems like a reasonable option. At this moment, Narf, one of the lizardmen, approaches and mentions that he has spent time with Minotaurs before, so he will know what questions to ask and what they will need. Hiraku gives the green light, and Narf begins to work immediately to discover the group's needs. With that resolved, Hiraku thinks everything should go smoothly from then on, since everything seems to be under control. But then they realize that the houses prepared for the Minotaurs are simply too small for them to live comfortably, so they start thinking together about what to do. At that moment, Florence rushes in and tells Hiraku that she has just received news from her father, indicating that the new residents will arrive in the village very soon. Vizel appears shortly after and seems completely exhausted. Florence asks why he didn't bring the war refugees, and he explains that the situation became quite complicated, and he was forced to use quick teleportation to bring a large number of people to a safe location at once, which took a heavy toll on him. The protagonist understands perfectly and tells him to go rest for now, since he must be completely drained. Considering everything, Hiraku assumes that the centaur group must be the new residents he was waiting for. The leader of the centaurs, Gervald, steps forward and introduces himself as the chief assistant of Viscount Big. Hiraku sincerely has no idea who that is, and takes a step back, letting Ladicase, one of the staff members, handle the situation. Grivaldi starts acting arrogantly due to his noble connections, and Ladicase delivers a reality check, reminding him that they are the ones arriving at the village, which means they cannot impose authority or make demands on the land. Gervald is immediately offended and raises his voice. Then, Ladicase calmly introduces herself as the daughter of Count Droguar, and the moment Gervald realizes her status is superior, he falls to his knees and begins to beg for forgiveness. After that, Ladicase. Hiraku asks if she can be designated to help the centaurs, since she has ties to their family. Hiraku sees no problem with it, but takes the opportunity to ask if everything is okay at her home, as he knows there is a serious war happening. She appreciates the concern and says there is nothing to worry about. Then, they start working to find suitable accommodation for the centaurs, but they realize that the small houses they built are as inadequate for them as they were for the Minotaurs. Technically, they would fit, but it would be very cramped and uncomfortable. Lucy asks Grivaldi if they can shrink in size with magic, but she replies that this is already the smallest size possible. While Hiraku still tries to find a solution, he has no moment of rest, as another group of young people appears at the entrance of the village. Hakuren explains that she found them wandering in the forest and thought it was a good idea to bring them. Hiraku sees no problem, but finds it strange that they are carrying something that looks like a log. Putting that aside, he approaches to greet them, but they do not respond. Hakure assumes they are just shy, but at that moment, the supposed log suddenly speaks and introduces itself. Hiraku then discovers that these girls belong to a species called New Divine, which has the ability to transform into plants and take the form of trees when they encounter monsters. However, when they take damage in that form, they lose the ability to return to human form for a time. They explain that their lands were affected by floods after humans cut down all the trees in the area. Then, they crossed the Death Forest. After a merchant named Michael spoke about the village, Hiraku finds this understandable and thinks that Michael probably cannot provide many details, as they ended up making the rest of the journey on their own. Hiraku wants to prepare a meal to properly welcome them, but the Digitin explains that their diet is more survival-oriented. She observes the high-quality fruits growing in that land, and concludes that the soil must be exceptional. Then, he takes them to the cultivation field, where Ego explains that all they really need is clean water, plenty of sunlight, and good soil to thrive. Hiraku takes all this in, and now that the food issue is resolved, asks what they would like to do regarding accommodation. Since they seem to be about the same size as normal humans, Hiraku feels relieved, thinking that the houses they built will finally be useful. But Ego quickly destroys that idea by saying they prefer to stay outdoors, which makes him immediately regret having gone to the trouble of building those houses in advance. After thinking for a bit, they manage to find a solution. The young Minotaurs stay in the normal-sized houses, the Centaurs are accommodated in the stables, and the New Divine simply remain in the field. Hiraku finds it a little unsettling to see them standing there all night and wonders if he will ever get used to this scene. Additionally, he and the others realize that they will still need to build suitable houses for the adult Minotaurs, and besides that, they will also need food, clothing, and all the other basic necessities to live. Rather than just thinking, Hiraku suggests they start with what they can do for now, and everyone sets to work designing the new houses. Now we move on to Hirako. He, in front of the leaders of each race, explains the situation and asks if they could help with the construction. While he was commenting on this, he notices Gruval. She doesn't lift her head at all. Here, Daddy Hirako, a bit uncomfortable, says it's not necessary to be so respectful. Gruval refuses to do so, claiming she is nothing in front of him. With no other choice, Hirako is about to leave it like that, but then he sees Rosalind with a poster of instructions on what to say in these cases. He starts reading it, thus ordering her to work for him, but of course with gentler words, which Gruval accepts very kindly. Having resolved this, he explains to everyone that he has designated each group of his people a representative to take care of them. He presents Narf as the representative of the Minotaurs, Rosalind for the Centaurs, and finally Mamu for the new Daphne, that is, the tree spirits. As we evidently don't know this last one, Hirako comments on her to us, as she is a beast girl who moved to his village from the village Roar, along with Sina and the others, and of course he appointed her as a representative after Sina recommended her for a higher position. Now Hirako explains the situation with the houses. Therefore we switch to Senna, and we are shown what they have done during this time. They built the paths, although the process wasn't so pleasant, as it was quite forested. Hakuren and Lace transform into dragons to burn everything, or at least that's what they thought, but here Hirako stops them, asking them to just make a clean path. Lace doesn't waste time and, with a punch, destroys an entire row of trees. However, Hakuren, with a simple kick, made an even longer path than Lace. Evidently, the blonde dragoness becomes jealous, thinking to show off all her power, but here, luckily, Hirako stops her and asks them to calm down, as he knows if they keep competing, they will destroy the entire forest. After finishing this, and they ask for help from the other inhabitants who, without hesitation, start working to prepare the materials. With everyone's effort, they manage to finish the path to the new village in a short time, while the rest worked on Hirako's house, taking care of his son. En knocks on the door and shows the new clothes that Sabaton made. He went down to little Alfred, but they discover that they are still too big for him. Yes, Sabaton thought a bit about the future, but anyway, returning with our builders, Hirako explains to us that they are building the houses for the Minotaurs. Upon entering one of them, Hirako notices how enormous everything is. Even a chair looks like a table to him. Then he notices the beds. The Minotaur chief explains that it has this design to prevent their horns from hitting the structure, which makes a lot of sense. After that, they go to the third village, the house of the Centaurs, the quite comfortable stables. Seeing that there is no door, Hiraku asks if they are sure to leave it that way. Gruval confirms, explaining that his kind is not very good at using regular doors. Then they plan to add a curtain pulled by a rope, which makes a lot of sense to me. Now we return to Hu. She cannot calm little Alfred's cries. Seeing this, N asks for permission to try something and then does the classic "Where's the baby?" game, which cheers the little one up, making him laugh sweetly. Hu asks for him to explain how he does that, but N says it is a secret. Time passes, and after a month of work, Ardo, both villages finally take shape. Everyone shows satisfaction for finishing before the winter arrives. At this moment, Florian asks what the villages will be called. Hirako replies that temporarily, he would call them Village 1. However, Florian prefers to avoid changes in the future, since it would be complicated to redo all the documents. The aunt suggests that, although Village 1 still does not have a designation, she recommends that in Village 2 the mayor be Gordon, and in Village 3, Gruval. Florian adds that it would be better to establish a clearer hierarchy to avoid confusion, differentiating Hirako's position so that he is recognized as the superior mayor, grand mayor, or better yet, king mayor, which makes our Hirako embarrassed. At this moment, Igui interrupts, asking when a village for his people will be built. Here, Hirako apologizes and explains that they decided not to build a village for them. Little Tronco becomes sad, so Hirako explains the reason. Since they are adapted to stay in one place, they plan to position them in strategic points so they can watch and inform about what happens, as their race can communicate telepathically and transmit the information to each village. Upon hearing this, Igu accepts the proposal. Now that each race has settled, Hirako wants to assign roles to the leaders of Village 1 and 2. At that moment, Daga rushes in, reporting a problem, as the Minotaurs and Centaurs are not suited for hunting in the forest. He explains that, although they seem strong, the Minotaurs come from a peaceful people, and the Centaurs are refugees who can barely sustain themselves. Hirako admits that he had never realized how difficult it is to hunt, since the infernal wolves always took care of it. Tia acknowledges their great strength, but proposes to keep people out of the forest and reinforce the defense in both villages. This idea seems sound to the mayor, who decides he will only speak with Kuro. Zabutom also asks if Nino and Daphne need guards. Mamoru responds that they can fight in ambushes, but are not capable of hunting large quantities on their own. Thus, he decides to leave the house with Kuro and the infernal wolves, while the rest focus on working the land in each village, intending to make them self-sufficient. However, a new problem arises. Nothing seems to take root. Worried, they begin to question when was the last time they planted and why. Despite their experience, they now cannot cultivate. Ricardo then explains that the only reason he can do this is because he lives in the middle of the forest and possesses the power of the all-powerful SSS agricultural tool, capable of making any soil fertile and allowing any seed to grow quickly, regardless of the season or climate. Yes, our Hirako was sweating, quite convinced. But anyway, from now on, the new villages must take care of their fields without the use of the all-powerful agricultural tool. Hirako, realizing that everything was more difficult than he imagined, feels a bit discouraged, but then the representative of the Minotaurs suggests putting down a layer of straw to prevent the soil from cooling. He explains that, with the arrival of winter, it might be better to plant wheat. Hirako recognizes that this guy knows a lot. Minotauro humbly denies it, but says he occasionally helped with field work in his old village. This seems fantastic to our protagonist, and so they began to prepare the fields under the guidance of their new agricultural senpai. After finishing the planting, he says they will have to wait until next summer to harvest. This discourages Hirako a bit, since after all, our lazy protagonist was used to getting very quick results in the fields of the Great Tree Village. After that, before going to the other village, Hiraku built a small shrine with statues of the gods of creation and agriculture. The villagers watched the statues in surprise, as they had a different image of the god of agriculture. Now, moving on to the centaurs, Hiraku mentions that they created a new line of work. That's right, centaur delivery, or centaur wrap, a way to offer their services to transport goods between villages, since they are not suited for hunting. They took advantage of another of their skills to leave any monster behind on the way. And yes, I am talking about speed. However, since they don't have supervision, they sometimes do illegal races that end up destroying the cart. Now we return to Hirako. He was reviewing some shipments when Gruval approaches and asks about the horse he has on the farm. Hirako explains that it was a gift from a merchant friend. However, the animal does not let him ride it, which disappoints him. So he asks that if she can communicate with the horses, to try to convince it to let him ride. Gruval says she cannot do that, but has another idea. And so we see our Hiraku mounting her. Yes, on Gruval. Graphically speaking, he mounted Gruval. But anyway, it seems to work, as the horse gets jealous. Therefore, the next day, the animal appears at Hiraku's entrance, offering its back. Hiraku, unsuspecting, starts to ride it and goes for a walk. Gruval watched everything hidden, but the horse notices her presence and casts a provocative glance. This infuriates Gruval to the point that, the next day, the two show up at Hiraku's door, waiting for him to ride one of them, but only one. At this moment, Hirako understands what's happening. Then, to calm the situation, he promises that he will mount each one every 2 days, and thus the matter is resolved. On the other hand, Mamu tries to talk to Ivu, offering his services for anything. However, the little log only talks about things related to the landscape. Yes, this guy is daydreaming. Meanwhile, we see Gordon explaining to the centaurs that the roots of the crops grow deeper, so it's better to plow the land more deeply. They understand the instruction. Hirako, observing all of this, feels relieved to see that everything is going very well. At first, he was worried about the large number of people, but now he hopes that each village can sustain itself. Ru comments that now everyone depends on him, and our mayor replies that he likes to be useful, although he also wants others to be able to solve some things on their own. Concerned about the future, Hirako reflects that he shouldn't rely too much on the all-powerful farming tool, as its current stability depends largely on divine powers. Rum notices his restlessness and says he can worry as much as he wants, but he doesn't intend to retire anytime soon, so he should relax a bit. Hirako agrees. Later, while reflecting on the future, the mayor remembers another important issue. The village of Great Tree has a large majority of women, while men are few. Therefore, he considers the need for new male inhabitants. He decides to talk to Gordon, who tells him that among his people there are only 28 men and asks if they need soldiers. Hirako tries to explain that it's not about that, but about another issue, more related to reproduction. The Minotaur understands and clarifies that they only marry among Minotaurs, partly because of their large size. The mayor understands and decides to respect their customs. Now Hirako thinks about how to approach the same topic with the centaurs. Since they are women, he asks the question, and Grual responds that there are about 30 men, but they are still children, as the adults are at war. When the mayor mentions marriage, she, a little nervous, quickly says she is single, but of course only for him. However, Hirako clarifies that he is asking if the centaurs have already married other races. Gruval replies that no, because it is difficult for them to relate to other species. Then she adds that if he required any of the women as a price for the stay, she asks him to choose her. Okay, here Gruval was too easy. But anyway, Hiraku, a little embarrassed, asks her to calm down because he is not asking for any of that. Finally, he decides to let the centaurs follow their own customs and reproduce among themselves. Winter comes quickly, so everyone takes a break from farming and enjoys the festive season. They eat from the food stocks they had stored earlier in the year, but now what else villages have joined them? There are many more people to feed. Hiraku begins to worry if they will have enough. Then Ant and Narf come to him with some news. The new villagers are eating much less than expected. If things continue like this, in fact, they will end up with leftover food that will spoil. Hiraku had already told everyone not to worry, as there was enough food. But even so, people continue to hold back. Hiraku thinks for a moment and suggests that they simply tell everyone to eat the meat and vegetables before they spoil. Ant and Narf agree, thinking it's a good idea. But then he notices that Mamu looks downcast and thinks that the new Daphne must be in need of something, but Mamu corrects him. The problem is exactly the opposite. They never need anything, neither food nor extra care. This is bothering her because she was excited to be responsible for them, but in practice, she still hasn't had anything to do. Then, Narf intervenes and says that, like one thing, the Minotaurs conveyed a request from New Daphne. They would like everyone to wear clothes when they are outside. Mamu gets up immediately. She admits that sometimes they forget to go out fully dressed and promises to remind them to keep clothes on at all times. Later that same day, Hiraku decides make a moat using a pestle and a tamper. When the girls find out, they are surprised, as they had never seen or heard of this method. He starts to beat the moat while they watch. Few are a little disappointed, expecting something more exciting. Still, they all want to try. So they take turns, but end up using too much force. Still, after all that, they succeed, make a good amount. In the end, the sauce and seasonings were ready, so everyone eats together and it's delicious. Read back to Hiraku some kuzamorte that she made herself. Using herbs aromatics mixed to the tune, the protagonist tastes it and says it is delicious. Then, Donovan appears with bags to liven up the atmosphere. He heard that they were working with rice and thought it was a good opportunity to attract everyone's attention. He immediately turns to him. Mottoing turns out to be a fun winter activity whenever the weather permits going outside. In the end, it turns out that Gordon is the best at mottoing of all, although no one seems too surprised by it. That later, a man in armor appears kneeling before a Minotaur woman, asking for her hand in marriage. Out of nowhere, she asks who he is. He takes off his helmet, introducing himself as Free, head of Casa Britoa, from the demonic kingdom of Galgardo. She introduces herself as Ronana. Hirako watches the scene, without understanding what is happening, until someone explains that, in the demonic kingdom, Free wanted to build a relationship with the Big Tree Village. He believed that marrying someone from there would be the best way to do so. He then goes to Hirako, the village leader, and asks for his blessing to marry Ronana, as she said she needed his permission first, but Hirako responds that he doesn't have the authority to decide who marries who. He says the first person he free must ask Ronana herself. If she accepts, then fine. Free then turns to her and asks, Ronana, just a Korra, making clear the consent. That's enough to consider the agreement made. When Free returns to the demonic kingdom, he misses Ronana very much and does not want another man to take her away. Therefore, he makes an immediate decision. He resigns from his position as a of the great generals and decides to leave to be with her. He knows it's a hasty and impulsive decision, but he doesn't care. He's willing to do anything for love. Meanwhile, Hirako is thinking about how to make the theme more interesting. Then, the idea of dried seaweed comes to mind. The girls had never heard of it and have no idea what it is, but when Hirako mentions that it grows along the seacoast, they conclude that the best person to ask about it is Michael. A few days later, Michael arrives and thanks Hirako for continuing to do so, business with him. The protagonist tells him not to worry about it. Michael then reveals a barrel of seaweed he brought with him and admits that it is not something he normally eats. So, he's not sure if it's exactly what Hirako had in mind. He takes a look at the barrel and says it's exactly what Hirako needs, then sets to work processing the algae, kneads them until they become a paste, and shapes them with a square mold. When finished, he creates a seaweed wrapper for food. Michael looks on, completely surprised, without imagining that seaweed could be shaped like that. The scene asks if these seaweed wrappers are actually eaten like that. Hirako replies that not yet. He puts them over the fire and explains that they first need to be heated to make them crunchy. This also facilitates digestion. After that, he wraps the mote in them and takes a bite. A wave of relief invades, as it is exactly the same amount of mote that he remembers from his past life. The girls notice his expression, but are not convinced that it could be that good. Then Hirako hands each of them a piece of toasted mochi wrapped in seaweed. They all agree that it is delicious. Michael sees the positive reception and makes a proposal. He offers to have his people harvest and process the seaweed exclusively for Hirako, in exchange for being able to exchange for some of the ingredients used in the motto. The protagonist says he can't promise that at the moment, as they first need to increase rice production for the motto, but he is willing to take the proposal to his people, out of consideration for Michael. Michael is happy to hear this, although deep down his true motivation is just to find another way to make money. Tries to ask about their alcohol, but everyone tells him not to get involved. That night, Hirako teaches the girls how to make sushi and is surprised at how quickly they learn. When they finish and everyone sits down to eat, Florence admits that at first she was a little uncomfortable, but after tasting it, she says it's delicious. Hirako mentions that the vinegar in the sushi helps to keep fresh food in lunchboxes. When they ask why, he explains that vinegar kills bacteria. After that, winter slowly begins to come to an end. Even when the snow melts, there are still cold days. Most years, it's hard to know when to start farming again, but now everyone agrees to follow Hirako's guidance. That day, he goes to the village's administrative officials and says that he was thinking about creating a new festival for the new villages. He presents some ideas, but the girls look at him blankly. Understand why someone would celebrate that all those ideas are festivals from his old life in Japan, so he understands why they don't make sense to them. The girls mention their own festivals and start to explain. Hirako listens, but doesn't understand anything they say. So, he decides to leave the entire organization completely in their hands. However, he realizes that they start to argue and don't manage to reach an agreement. He makes each one write down their local traditions, folds the papers and puts them in a box. He draws a paper himself and ends up a martial arts competition. Hiraku asks out loud how this should work. Florin explains that it would be a competition where everyone would face different fighting styles against each other. She even thinks the idea is brilliant and suggests start planning immediately. Thus, time passes. When spring arrives, we see that everyone is very excited, practicing for the martial arts tournament. However, Hiraku still doesn't understand. So, he asks Aunt Zim why that everyone is training. She responds that it is because of the martial arts tournament, explains that to have power in the demonic realm, combat strength is necessary. However, Aunt Zim just makes herself silly. Florin tells him to go train. A while later, Hakurin tells Hiraku that he's going home to train. She says that since he's been in that place, he hasn't used all his strength. Hiraku imagines that if he used all his strength, he would destroy the entire forest. so he recommends that she be the referee because he doesn't know anything about martial arts and he needs her. Hakuren isn't convinced, but after Hiraku sends that interspatial talk that the referee needs to be someone strong to show everyone what his true strength is, he ends up convincing her. The detail is that now he also needs to manipulate Last because she is about to go home to train. In a desperate tactic, he warns her that he needs 2 referees and that only true and experienced fighters can be referees. The girl completely falls into the conversation. However, she still wants to fight. So in the end, Hirako decides to give them an exhibition battle. On the other hand, Hirarushi is also excited, as she will finally be able to give a punch to his aunt after a long time. Although the aunt asks when one of her blows managed to hit her, they show great rivalry. Hirako is worried. Now, he needs to prepare to build the fighting arena, which must have the scenery, seats, and tent area as they need to eat, and watch the fight elegantly. Before they knew it, the day of the festival had already arrived. Everyone is having a great time. Yuri arrives with his father, Galgar, and introduces him to Hirako. He wonders how he should treat him since he doesn't know the customs of the demonic kingdom, but Yuri says to their father who doesn't need to be so formal. So, they end up introducing themselves quite confidently. At that moment, Hakure arrives with his father, the Dragon Emperor. Yuri asks his father if that isn't the Dragon Emperor, but leave that up in the air, because Galgar says yes and that it's better for her to stay quiet. Still, Hirako takes charge of introducing them a little later, Gran Maria. The Great Tree Martial Arts Tournament begins. Dose comments that the tournament is promising, but we see that Galgar seems a little nervous. Hirako notices that everyone is quite excited, although he feels a little uncomfortable with the place he was given. Since it was supposedly for the guests, Lu asked him to calm down and say a few words. When taking the microphone, Hirako asks everyone not to calm down, get hurt. He explains the rules of the tournament, asking again not to get hurt. The tournament is made up of combats drawn one by one. The winner is whoever takes the opponent out of the ring or breaks the bands that are in your head. The first fight is between Rosalinde from the City Hall team against Mamu, the nanny of the new Daphne. The fight begins and the girl demonstrates great combat skills. Hirako becomes surprising since their expectations were different. The winner of the first fight is Rosalinde, who despite winning, received a lot of damage. Flora, responsible for healing the injured, warns the participants that can heal broken bones, but putting them back together is more difficult, so he suggests that they don't rip off limbs. The tournament continues to advance. Donovan wins his fight. After all, the dwarves are quite strong. No wonder they crossed all the mountains to reach that forest on their own. Many more arrived since then. Now it's Grutwald's turn. Anyone would think she would win, but when she got too excited, she ended up running too much and left the ring. In turn, Ego won his fight against the drunken slime. The final fight is between Florin, who fights with sword and magic, and Sina, who intends to fight. Based on beating Yuri and Galgar cheer for Florin. As soon as the fight begins, Florin shows great control magical, but Sina shows excellent physical skills, dodging all the attacks and then grabs her to throw her out of the ring. Let's go, Florin. Be a great opponent and manage to recover and counterattack. In the end, both end up falling out of the ring, resulting in a draw. With this, the open phase ends. The winners receive honorary medals, while the losers receive the audience applause. However, this is only the first part of the festival. Tiazi notes that Hiraku's name is not among the participants. So, they both think that maybe there will be a surprise upon hearing this. Hiraku worries, asking if he is some secret unlockable character or something. Now the Warriors tournament begins. The winner will be the one who leaves the opponent unconscious or makes him surrender. There are no restrictions, and only those who are truly capable can participate, following strict rules. In the first fight, one, the Infernal Wolf, faces the leader of the Lamias, Junior. She is distressed because the Infernal Wolves almost exterminated her people. Even so, she puts up a great fight. However, when cornered, Uno releases his infernal power. Upon seeing this, Junior ends up surrendering. Sina panics, and Florencio thinks that the story of a single hell wolf destroying an entire people could be true. The second. The fight was between Makura, one of Sabutao's offspring, and Daga. She dodges all the attacks and finally traps her movements with webs, winning the fight. In the third fight, Garf faces proving to be the best fighter in the village. At one point, Aya almost throws him out of the stadium with a single blow, but he narrowly avoids seeing that he is no match. He surrenders. Then, it's Gran Maria's turn against Leia. The rules change, as falling from the stage does not end the fight, as Gran Maria can fly. The fight begins, Leia attacks at high speed, becoming invisible and proving to be a great fighter. Gran Maria, confident, makes a mistake when going up to watch her from above. Leia was waiting for this. She manages to immobilize her and apply a key to force her to surrender, but Gran Maria does not give in, saying that it does not weigh even half the weight of her spear. Realizing that she could lose the advantage, village, she does a kamikaze attack, receiving a powerful beam along with Gran Maria. Thus, he would be able to win. But, as he is unable to remain standing, it ends in a draw. Hiraku thinks it was an epic battle, but the real are about to begin. Now it's Tia's turn against Kudel. With a single move, Tia defeats her. Then, Lu faces Corone, who already knows she's finished, being also defeated, with a single blow. Now the most awaited fight begins. Lu against Aunt Lu changes clothes for combat mode. When the fight starts, everything becomes something in the style of Dragon Ball. The attacks are so fast and powerful that they cannot be seen. Hiraku cannot understand what is happening, so he uses his magical tool to see the fight, being impressed by their power. Moon attacks with great magical power, dragging Ant to the ground, stepping on her foot and delivering several blows. But Ant counterattacks and they start exchanging punches. Nisai Kikuris practically becomes a shonen anime. Hiraku thinks that the blows seem to come from friendship. In the end, Ant wins. How Lu is a terrible loser, she starts complaining to Hiraku, saying that Ant was very mean to her. Later, in the final fight, Ant faces Makura, but with a single move, she ends up defeated. In the end, Hiraku crowns Makura. Garf and Uno regret not having had a chance against her. Hiraku thanks all the participants and announces that it is time to rest. However, Hakuren and Last begin to protest because now it's their turn to fight. Hiraku remembers that he promised an exhibition fight, so he announces the fight between Hakuren and Last. When it begins, the clash of powers is so great that the beam of energy can be seen from the demonic realm. After all the destruction, those present are happy because at least the alcohol survived. Meanwhile, Lu scolds them both for not holding back. They claim that they held back. The winner is Hakuren, the Dragon Emperor. 12 comments that it has been a long time since he saw such an exciting fight. He asks Galgar if he would like to face him one day, but he just laughs and says, "Ah, you're very funny." In turn, Florin comments to Hirako that despite everything, things turned out well. Hirako can't believe that. For her, this is okay. But the important thing is that everyone had fun. East asks when the next one will be. Hirako replies that, for now, it's better to have a break. Now, returning to the daily activities of the village, Hiraku is harvesting the seasonal vegetables, together with Sena. Seeing that there is plenty of daikon for the season, he begins to think of ways to prepare it. So, he has the idea of making dried daikon. But while he was thinking about it, some children appear warning that strange people have arrived in the village. When Hiraku arrives at the place, he sees the owl griffin and a woman prostrate before the sanctuary of the gods. Courteously, he invites them to enter. Once at home, he introduces his son. While Valgriff held the little one, Hiraku asks about the woman who accompanies him. If by chance it would be his wife, she answers no and introduces herself as Fuchu, a priestess Korin. This leaves the protagonist a little confused. So, Valgriff explains that it is about a conglomerate of all the gods and religions worshipped in these lands. Lu also mentions that Valgriff is the leader of the Korin religion and that the High Priestess Fuchu is someone of such prestige that participates in parades to celebrate her presence. After hearing all this, Hiraku asks if they shouldn't have received her more respectfully. The guests reassure him, because they reveal that in fact, they came to make a request. At that moment, Fushu begs the protagonist to save his son. Hiraku doesn't quite understand why he asks him to do this, but then Fushu explains that he knew that the vampire princess, Lu, the foremost authority on the study of medicinal herbs and flora, the famous seeker of knowledge and incomparable apothecary, lives in that village. Then everyone goes to the Flora's laboratory. Hiraku asks why she never said she was famous. Flora humbly replies that she wrote some books that are used as teaching materials in all magic schools of the world. Then, he asks about the child's illness. However, after receiving all the information, both Lu and Flora keep their heads down. This is because it is something extremely rare. Even so, they don't give up and start researching. After a whole day of work, they discover a possible cure. Lu asks Hiraku to gather the necessary ingredients. As expected, he accepts and starts searching the entire village for the necessary materials. Among them, he asks Last for help to get a dragon's tear. After obtaining this item, he realizes that he needs a dark stone of the mountains. Big Guru looks familiar. Hakuren comments that it could be something that exists in Drame's lair. He uses it to keep a door open. She didn't even know it had so much value, but even so, he offers to look for him. Meanwhile, the girls who went after the errant mushroom face difficulties. He is very strong, but still, they manage to get him. With all the ingredients gathered, only one potted plant is missing, which is rare and needs to be removed with care. Hiraku hopes it is one of those plants that scream when being pulled out, but when he takes it out, he realizes that it is normal. However, it releases an extremely strong smell, although it is non-toxic. With all the ingredients ready comes the hardest part, preparing the cure. The girls need to follow an extremely rigorous process. During the attempts, they almost burn the house down. During these days, Fukushu remains in prayer. From dawn until night, Hiraku asks her to rest, but he responds that that's the only thing he can do. While the girls almost blow up the house. After several attempts, they finally manage to produce the medicine. Luxury is deeply grateful for the effort, but they only ask that she go immediately to her son and administer the cure. So the visitors say goodbye. Val Griff says he hopes to see them again in 10 years. Hiraku also thanks the girls, who comment that they could write several books with everything they discovered. On the other hand, the statue in front of which Fukushu was praying starts to emit a blinding glow. Something quite strange. No one knows if it was a miracle, so they decide to close it and open it only during prayer times. The next day, some girls pass by the field and stop when they see a tree. Hiraku explains that that was an experimental area. With the powerful agricultural tool that God gave him, he could grow anything he imagined without needing seeds. However, this also made it cultivate unknown things, and at some point that tree appeared. Frauren comments that they should record everything they try to cultivate, since they cannot. They know how these things can interact with other crops, but they decide to let it pass because it is an experiment. Observing the tree, they notice that it has green fruits. One of them fell, and it broke. Then Hiraku realizes that they are nuts. He comments that he had never seen how they grow. He observes that, because they are very hard, they normally require special tools. However, Tia manages, break them easily with your fingers. Lauren records this information. Then, they find another tree where almonds grow. With this, Hiraku concludes that other types of trees can also have appeared. Soon after, they find a plant, and the girls ask if it is a vegetable or a potato. Hiraku responds that it is not far from that, pulls out the plant and shows that there are peanuts growing on it. The earth. This is quite curious. From the looks of it, the girls compare it to beans. Now, with these 3 dried fruits, Hiraku remembers how he once wanted to taste a handful of mixed nuts. He thinks that if he had imagined beer, perhaps that entire field would have been made of wheat. Yes, our protagonist is already starting to have drunken thoughts. After that, upon seeing a tree with fruit, from the looks of it, Fraurai guesses that they are similar to apples or perhaps something spicy. However, it turns out to be something completely new. When they pluck one, they discover that that protruding part was, in fact, its seed. Upon seeing this, Hiraku understands that it is cashew. The flavor of the fruit was very exotic. Leaving that aside, Hiraku tells a short story. There was once a small slime that purified the village water, but one day, he fell into a wine barrel and turned into a wine slime. Since then, this slime appeared at every event trying to get more to drink. However, he never learned nothing more about him. Basically, he disappeared. Finally, back to normal activities. One morning, while Hiraku and Tia were testing a new invention, 2 dragons appeared, asking what they were doing. Hiraku explains that they are testing a parachute in case they ever fall while flying. To this, Hakuren asks why they don't just land on the ground. As always, Hiraku responds, which is not so simple, at least for him. While they were discussing possible improvements, the famous drunken slime appears. He offers to test the invention. So, Tia takes him to a great height and lets him go. But as the parachute descends too slowly, the slime simply throws itself upon seeing it on the ground. Hiraku asks if it's okay. The slime gets up and leaves, implying that he didn't suffer anything and that he found it all boring. Yes, this drunken slime is used too much. Now, the scene changes to the elves' studio from the mountain. Everyone is working hard among them. We met Iterto, Mrs. Aya's assistant. She says that they grew up together, and that, in fact, she was the one who should take the lead, but she thought she was a better fit as an assistant, so she turned it down. That made her take on the role. She believes it ended up working, but after many difficulties, they arrived in the village of the Great Tree, where the mayor welcomed them with lots of food, hot baths, and comfortable beds. Luxuries for the kind of life they led before, so they are very grateful to the village. However, as leader's assistant, Iterto needs to think about how to continue enjoying these amenities. Although Mrs. Iya doesn't seem to worry about this, for Iterto, the most important thing is that his people demonstrate the benefits you can offer the village. Fortunately, they have great ability, which has allowed them to make important contributions. She also maintains a good relationship with the mayor and knows that Hirako gets along well with everyone, without favoritism. Still, winning his favor would be a big help, something you would be willing to try. The situation is a bit curious, because although she sometimes gets nervous around him, she just says who respects him a lot. You understand that well. So, together they decide to win the favor of Hirako. They go to a mountain where the lady lifts a large rock, asking if that would call the attention of the mayor. She says that she has been increasing the size of the rock every day, but Itaro clarifies that you don't need muscles to attract his interest, Ia questions, as he has always believed that a strong physique was the way to win over a man. Itaro does not deny that there are stories like this, but says that this will not help their objective. In the village, Mrs. Aya finally understands that in addition, the other residents are much stronger than her, so he wouldn't be able to impress Hirako that way. Still, he doesn't seem to fully understand. So, Itaro decides to show it in practice before. From Hirako, makes Aya lift the rock. She asks if he isn't impressed, but ends up just scaring him with it. Finally, he gets the point. She decides to change her strategy. She thought the plan would be to do sit-ups, but Iterto wants her to wear a dress. He then suggests that she train her legs. She feels strange, but thinking about the good of her people, decides to exercise. Although Iterto begs her to stop focusing only on muscles, she must start paying attention to the curves and shape of her body, because this is what draws her men's attention. Many end up gaining it without making an effort, and that's how it ends. On a new day, Hiraku watched the descendants of Zabutum he healed, capturing several winged people while watching that tremendous spectacle. At that moment, Gran Maria appears, informing that did not find any more infiltrators. Hiraku thanks her for the information and then asks if she knows the captured angels. Gran Maria replies yes, and explains that, as it was difficult to monitor the entire territory of the Great Tree, decided to visit the angel settlements to ask for help. However, apparently, the daughter of an angelic leader gathered forces and attacked the village. Even after hearing all this, and still without understanding nothing, Hiraku questions why they had planned that. Just at that moment, one of the angels starts screaming, demanding to be released. Seeing how agitated she was, Hiraku asks Gran Maria if that was the daughter of the leader. Gran Maria confirms and presents her as Kiabit, the future leader of the angels. Ditaku is already screaming while questioning the way the village of Hiraku receives her guests. Our protagonist, on the other hand, makes it clear that if they hadn't tried to do that, they would have been received normally. So we see how it all happened. The crazy woman, along with her allies, went all out to attack, but the little descendants of Kuro and Sabutao, upon realizing that they could be a threat, neutralized them all without difficulty, clarifies that they did not intend to cause any harm, but only to preserve the pride of their people. She explains that angels are a virtuous race, adored by many. However, one of their number lives a life of depravity in that village. Upon hearing this, Hirako asks Gran Maria if that was true. The blonde, embarrassed, replies no. Bit continues saying that, in addition, she was also against the customs of her people. Hirako asks again what she is referring to, but thinking about it, she believes it is because of drinking alcohol. Bit replies that it has nothing to do with that, but with the fact that Grand Maria never took the test to claim a husband. Seeing that Hirako didn't understand anything, Gran Maria explains that angels are a race made up only of women to perpetuate her species. They need to bring husbands from other races. However, they cannot accept just any man, only someone capable of proving their worth. Through unbearable tests, in light of this, Hiraku suggests clarifying the situation, but Gran Maria doubts that Kiabite will believe them. Although he is sure that the others will, in this case, Hiraku creates a plan. He releases all the wings, except Kiabite. The others mention that due to the attack on the village, they could receive severe punishments. However, he offers the chance to redeem, serving Gran Maria. From that moment on, without hesitation, the Arpies agree to change sides. The Yats, angels are afraid of being expelled from the angelic kingdom in the future. Realizing this, Hiraku invents a punishment for Kiabit, but gives everyone the option of apologizing to reduce the sentence. In light of this, all the angels kneel down, begging for mercy on their behalf. Lady even Gran Maria is surprised to see that he managed to solve everything so easily. After that, we see everyone eating, happy and satisfied, while Kiabite continues to hang. Yes, that's which happens. For messing up, Hiraku suggests she give up, but Kiabit refuses to apologize, believing he is just trying to manipulate her. Seeing that she wouldn't give up, Maria asks Hiraku if he would like to take the angel test to convince her. Upon hearing this, Hiraku replies that it's fine, as long as he doesn't have to fly or fight. Maria guarantees that everything will work out. So, everyone goes to the house, where Abid explains that the test of the angels consists of 5 steps. The first is very simple. It is a test of wealth, where the candidate must donate 777 gold coins to the angels. Yes, a lot of money, even more just to get married. Obviously, this is no problem for our macho man. Hiraku asks if he can offer valuable objects in the place. Abit confirms, although he doubts that anything in that village is worth that much money, or at least that's what she thought, until they showed her a go-go stone. It was some little thing that Hiraku had on hand, which was worth 1,000 gold coins. Abit holds back his excitement for the stone and humbly accepts it. Thus, Hiraku passes the first test. The second stage is a test of intelligence. Abit explains that he will place some stones on the table, and each turn each participant will be able to take between 1 and 3 stones. Taking the last one means losing. Hirako is a little confused. Abit mocks him, letting him start first. He ends up losing, so she asks for a rematch, this time starting first and adding 1 more stone. But still, he loses again, to his father, Hirako. He comments that this is a common game among angels and that he had played it before. The trick is to always pick up 3 stones and leave 1 separate. Knowing this, it is possible to always win. So, we move on to the third stage, a test of martial skill. The rules consist of defeating. The designated opponent, Hirako, doesn't seem very confident, but Gran Maria gives him a reassuring sign. Then, our mayor asks who his opponent will be, and it is none other than the enemy of all angels, the diabolical vampire princess, Lulu Lucy, a woman wanted all over the world and which, for Hirako, would be impossible to find. Therefore, Abit, all confident, suggests that he simply give up. So, Hirako makes Lulu appear. Crazy wants to face her and asks her to look to the side, pretending that she just defeated her. Maria can barely hold back her laughter, so that bit has no other option, other than moving on to the next stage. It's a test of negotiation. In it, Hirako would need to talk to the impossible dragon, guardian of the mountains Prime, an extremely imposing figure. However, suddenly the dragon appears through the window, asking the mayor if he had anything to offer him. So they move on to the last stage, a test of luck. A coin is tossed in the air. If it lands heads, Hiraku wins. In this case, our protagonist could only pray. In the end, he wins, but Kiabit tries to reverse the result, saying that he lost. Until then, Tia appears, engraving the coin on the floor and ending the test. Shortly afterwards, Tia explains that she didn't appear before, so as not to disturb Kiabit reveals why those tests were so important for the future leader. She says that Kiabit's mother simplified the tests to marry a man below her status. Because of this, she spent her entire life being the target of nasty comments behind his back. Finally, Hiraku understands why Kiabit acted that way. Then, the girl approaches, apologizing for her behavior so far. Hiraku replies that it was no big deal. Leaving that behind, he takes the others to give him a real welcome. During that period, everyone began to strengthen the village's defenses with the help of Kiabit and the Harpies. This made Tia and Gramaria extremely happy. In another scene, during a peaceful morning, Hiraku sees another dragon appear in the village. The monster goes to him, and transforming into a human, he begs to be given shelter so they can talk calmly. Hiraku invites him, along with Hakurin and Drime, into the house. The young dragon is introduced. His name is Domimi, younger brother of the other two. The boy starts to talk about the problems he is going through, but none of the brothers pay attention to him. With terror in his eyes, Domimi complains about never being heard, not even now that he is running for his life. Yes, the poor guy is completely ignored. Upon hearing that, Hiraku is surprised, as he never imagined that dragons could be afraid of anything. At that moment, the table starts to shake, leaving poor Domimi in a panic. When everyone looks at the window, they see a scary dragon staring at the group. The monster takes on human form, revealing itself to be a woman named Kuan. Domime's fiancé, Hiraku, feels relief when she realizes that she is not dangerous. However, she still doesn't understand why Domime feels so much afraid of her. Then, Kuan starts talking to Domime in such an intimidating way that, little by little, Hiraku understands everything about that relationship. She was clearly the alpha. When Dran tries to help his brother younger, interfering in the conversation, Kuan makes him shut up and sit down with just a look. So, Kurem decides to intervene, asking Kuan to stop bullying his little brother. The woman with black hair denies that and guarantees that, in fact, it is she who is being intimidated. She says that whenever she goes to visit him, Domime avoids her and tries to escape from her. In fact, that is exactly what he did now, which makes her suspect that maybe he likes another woman. Yes, the poor thing was just jealous. When everything starts to shake once again, Hiraku intervenes, asking for a moment alone with Domime. Kuan responds that they can talk in front of her. Yes, she is extremely toxic. Hiraku then clarifies that this is a man-to-man, male-to-male matter. Take Domime out of the room. Hiraku tried to talk to him, but Domini was already prepared to run away like a real coward. Fortunately, Hiraku stops him. He asks how many times Domini has tried to escape. After all, Just looking at Kwan, it's clear that it would be impossible to lose her. It doesn't matter if there is any condition of the marriage that bothers him. His luck ran out the moment he met her. Yes, Hiraku was cold about it. So, Domini reveals who was the one who was waiting for him all this time. Hiraku suggests that he try to think about the good, things he can get out of that marriage, leaving aside what discourages him. Domini responds that she would never agree with what he wants, but admits that she didn't even ask. Knowing this, Hiraku suggests that he talk to her, and if he can't say everything face to face, at least write. So, he wouldn't leave any words out. Holding his pen, Domini tries to accept Kwan as his wife. Meanwhile, Hiraku talks to Kwan and asks if she really wants to get married. Error 500. Server error 1500. That's an error? There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. But she explains that it's not to simply obey his wishes, it's so that they both respect each other's feelings. Therefore, she should also write what she wanted. Domini accepts, and will write alone. At that moment, Drive approaches the mayor and reveals that dragon women are not easy to convince. So, he should prepare himself. Thus, the two spend the entire night writing. Juon writes about wanting to go on dates and eat the dishes prepared by Domini. All very sweet of her. Domini writes about how much she scares him. Yes, the guy really has no courage. At dawn, the two deliver their wishes, but they are so shy that they cannot even receive them back. So, they continue writing until they finally leave together. Hakuren asks the mayor what motivated him to help Domini. Hirako replies that he was worried about Kwan chasing the boy in dragon form. Besides, they weren't complete either. Unknown. Upon hearing this, Hakuren comments that he will also write a letter to the mayor Iraku. Immediately asks her to take it easy with the requests, and thus the video ends. Comment on the word marriage. If you reached the end,